Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to How to Get Hired. I am Bill, the company's expert, and I want to thank you for being here. This is the live stream where we talk about how to get hired. So anything to do with job interviews, resumes, careers, the methods of getting hired, discovering jobs, all that kind of stuff. This is also a Q&A, so if you see my face, you should hopefully see a chat box nearby. Get in the chat. Let me know what you're struggling with, what you're wondering about, and I will do my best to help you out. Special thanks to my YouTube channel members. Membership has its privileges. And my Patreons and my super thanks donors. If you want me to answer your question fully and completely and pretty much immediately, send a super thanks or a super sticker, and I will prioritize helping you out. And also to my participants. So thank you for being here. You guys are awesome. I see there's 13 people here today. And, Pearl is already in the chat. Pearl says, "Hello, Bill. Is the Get Hired podcast now airing twice a week?" Technically, no, but I am doing more live streaming. So what I'm doing is I'm doing my 2 traditional live streams once a week. This is the first one, How to Get Hired. The second one is Side Hustle Ideas, where we talk about entrepreneurship and business and starting a side hustle and business concepts, how to succeed in business. But I've recently added 2 new ones as kind of an experiment. One is a collaboration live stream that I'm doing on Mondays, where I've reached out to several other YouTubers that are in this space that give advice on careers and job interviews and stuff like that. And I've been trying to get people to collaborate and get us all together, and we can give our various different perspectives on how to answer job interview questions and how best to get hired. So that's on Mondays, and that's called Career Expert Roundtable. We've only done 2 episodes so far. And the other experiment is something that's happening later today in a couple of hours. It's called Honest HR Nitrous, and that's where I really don't hold back when it comes to this stuff, like how to get hired in careers, because there's so much BS involved. There's so much contradictory advice. There's so many people trying to pull the wool over everybody's eyes, to be honest, and talking about things that they know nothing about. And it's hard to sort through the mire of a lot of this stuff for a lot of people. So that's where we get together and we bitch and we talk about how things are really working, what's going on behind the scenes, and why certain parties say certain things, what's the incentive structure behind that. So it's a bit of an experiment. It's a work in progress, but I'm doing that in a couple hours. So if you have any interest in that, join me then. Okay, so the title of today's episode of How to Get Hired is how much salary do you need? The best answer. And also, what animal best represents you? Best answer. I want to kick it off while we're waiting for questions from you guys. I want to kick it off with the answer to that, because that's an interesting question. People still ask that, if you can believe that. It's like this throwback to this pseudo psychobabble that sort of came out in the 1970s. All of a sudden, it seems like the 70s were the golden age of psychologists coming out with theories that proved to be disastrously wrong, right? Things that were later completely disproven, right? It's the age of, primal scream therapy and, autism being caused by refrigerator mothers, and just a lot of false thinking happened in the 70s. At least that's the impression I get. And so this question is kind of something that, as far as I can tell, came out of that. Almost like with ink blot tests. Those went back to I think the 50s, when ink blot tests came out. But it was almost like the version of ink blot tests that recruiters would ask in job interviews. It was this kind of psychology thing. What animal best represents you? And they were asking this question like they're dead serious in a job interview. And, you may not have prepared for this question, or you may not have heard of this question before. And so this took a lot of people by surprise, and very abstract. And the bottom line, okay, here's what's actually going on in this question, if you're interested. it's dreamed up by people that have very abstract thinking. And so animals have different associations, I guess. Some animals are workers, like horses, right? They're a good worker. Or some animals, like they're known for something. Like a dog is known for, among other things, being loyal, right? So, that's what they're probing for with this ridiculous question. They're saying, what animal best represents you? And if you say an animal that, negative connotations come to mind immediately, then that's an issue, right? Like, for example, ants are known for being good workers, like worker ants, right? Along with horses and things. So the idea was that depending on what job you're going for, what qualities would be needed in the candidate, right? So, for example, if you're going for a managerial level job, you're going to be making decisions on your own. You're not going to be necessarily consulting with people for everything you do or working as a team. You're going to be the sort of fearless leader. And so if, in theory, if they were to ask you this stupid question and you were to say an animal that was like known for being part of a herd, right? Like a cow or a deer or something like that, that would not be the best answer if you were going for a management type job, right? Some animals, like I'm not an animal expert, but they're independent, like polar bears. They don't live in communities of polar bears. They're sort of like on their own, and that's how they live, right? They're solo animals that don't necessarily participate in a community and work as a team. So if you were getting a job where you were supposed to be a member of a team and work very closely with the people around you, and they said, what type of animal best represents you? And you said something like polar bear, that would indicate to these people, according to this theory, that you wouldn't be the most suitable candidate. Your personality's all wrong, right? You're more of a loner, a lone shark, lone wolf kind of thing, when they're looking for someone who's going to be part of a herd, someone who's going to work with everyone and make decisions together and act together and get approvals for everything, right? So that was the idea, okay? So if ever somebody asks you this question, you go to a job interview and they say, what animal best represents you? Instead of like looking at, like having your jaw drop and looking at them, staring at them for 30 seconds while you process, can this person really be stupid enough to ask a question like this? You'll know what to do. You think of an animal that has a couple of qualities that are needed for the job. A dog is a good answer because it's loyal. A horse is a good answer because it's a hard worker, right? Don't give any animals that have negative connotations like skunks or rats or mosquitoes or, vermin of any kind, and if you're going for a management type job, the cliche answer was to say eagle because it flies high, it, looks at things down there from afar and, sees all and can operate independently, right? So that was the theory behind this question. So it's a more exotic question. You're probably not going to get this at every job interview you go to, but if you go to, say, 15 interviews, you're probably going to encounter this question once. Some person is out there that thinks it's a good idea to ask this and that it will reveal something about you in what you say. That's what they think. So this is a throwback to the 1970s that is still around, like a lot of these cliche job interview questions. A lot of the questions they ask have been around for decades. Tell me about yourself. That's been around for decades. What salary do you need? That's been around for decades, like even longer. Why did you leave your last job? That's been around since as far as anyone's been able to research. These are very old. What is your weakness? Has also been with us for a very long time, right? These are common interview questions. And recruiters in this day and age, they like to dress up those questions and ask them in new and exciting ways. But it's the same question, right? So instead of saying, what is your weakness? They'll say, what is something that you're working on or, something like that, right? But it's the same question. So you give the same answer. Anyway, so if ever you get that question, that's how you answer it. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. I wanted to cover that because as you can imagine, I don't cover that one very often. Yes, so we are, this is a Q&A, so I see there's 24 people here, so get in the chat if you can. Let me know what you're wondering about, what you're struggling with. I'm going to move on to the main topic of this live stream, which is answering the question, how much salary do you need? But beyond that, I don't have a plan, so start asking questions and I will get to those, and that will hopefully fuel a thriving discussion as we go. Okay, so here's the main issue today. The best answer to the job interview question, how much salary do you need? As always, they're probably going to ask you this. It's almost guaranteed. In some way, shape, or form, they're going to need this information from you at the early stages of the recruitment and the selection process. So if they don't ask you this on a form, they will probably ask you in person. And even if they do ask you on a form, like on an original job application, they will probably ask it again in a screening interview just to visually confirm that what you put was honest or was thought through. Okay. So because after all, this is basically it's a sudden death elimination question. If you want too much money and you won't take anything less, and you're asking for more than the range that they're willing to pay, doesn't matter how brilliant you are, game's over, right? So that's why they need an answer to this before they move forward. It's probably the most important screening question. Okay. There's a lot to this question. Now, if they ask you this in an interview, you have the freedom to say different things. Okay. You can give an explanation or you can give a number. You can dance around the question and all this kind of stuff. But if they ask this to you on a form, they can eliminate anything other than you giving a number. That's the thing. So if they ask you this in a web form, what's very common is that there'll be a field that you have to fill in. Like they ask a question and then you have to type in your answer. And the answer will only accept numbers. So you can't say negotiable or you can't say, anything else there. You can't put a little sentence or something. They only want a number. And you can't continue with your application unless you give them a number as an answer to this question. So it really pushes you into a corner where you have to give a number. Now, like we're going to talk about later, what you want to do ideally is avoid this question. You don't want to give them an answer because you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Okay, that's the nature of this question. You are this is a standard negotiating position where you're negotiating on price. That's basically, it's a one-dimensional thing, and you don't know what they're prepared to pay. Sure, they may have given you a range. They may have said something, but you don't know if that's truthful. That's the bottom line. And it's a well-known fact that people will put on a job posting, they'll put like a range. If they do give a range, they can put a range, but it's not the actual range. Maybe the actual range is a little broader than what they're saying, but they want people to be happy with kind of the middle of the range. So they'll put a smaller range, they'll disclose that publicly, right? When in reality, if they find a really amazing candidate, they would be prepared to go a little bit higher. They would be able to go a bit higher than the range they set. But they're not telling you that, right? So this is the problem. You're really going into this question blind. You don't know what they're prepared to pay, but they want you to give a number first, okay? So the problem is that you've got conflicting things. If you put a number that's too low, it doesn't make any sense for you to take this job. Like if you say minimum wage, and for you, that it doesn't make much sense. You can barely live, on that or something. Then what's the point of even doing this? If you put a number that's too high, they eliminate you outright, and then you don't get any further in the process. They don't even take a good look at you to see how amazing you really are, right? So that's the issue. So this is why you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. So the thing you want to do is not give a number. Now, there are a couple of standard ways of wriggling out of this. So if they ask you this in a job interview, you would first say like, well, it's too soon to say. I would need more details first. I could get you that later on once I learn more about this position and what exactly is involved. Something like that, right? Now, sometimes that'll work, but usually it won't. They'll keep pressing you, right? Another standard way of deflecting it is to turn the question around them, right? And say, the way I phrase it, which I think is pretty watertight, is to say, well, this is an approved position. This position has been approved by the company, and therefore the salary range for this position must have been approved by the company. So can I ask what it is, since you work for the company, right? You would know that, right? Sometimes that works. They'll give you the range. They'll say, oh, it pays anywhere between 50 and 100 or, whatever, right? But often, once again, they won't fall for that trap. It's worth trying, but it's common that they've heard that one before. So they say, oh, I don't know the range for the job that I'm hiring for, right? Right? Like anyone believes that, right? You're just hiring people. You have no idea how much you can pay them. Yeah, I believe you. But they'll say stuff like this, these bold lies right to your face for the purposes of negotiation. So it's like, okay, the ball's back in our court. So the standard way to get out of it is to give a wide range where you say, okay, well, at this stage, all I can tell you is that anything between this number and this number, is on the table. I'd consider anything between this number and this number. And you give a very wide range, but not ridiculous. Those two numbers, they're still within reason, but they're quite, as far apart as you can make them, right? That's the idea. Now, what's the purpose of doing this? The purpose of doing this is so that they can't eliminate you right here and now because you set a number too low, right? You gave a range and you said anything within this is fine, right? Or sorry, a number too high. They can't eliminate you for giving a number that's too high because you did say that, you would consider anything as far down as this number, right? On the low range. So they can't do a hard elimination of you, right? But the good thing about this is that they can't pin you down to a low number later on because you did say, well, I would consider anything between this, and this is a higher number. So if you ask for more money later on in the process, they can't say, hey, you're going back on your word. It's like, no, I told you from the outset, somewhere in here would be fine. And I'm still within that range in what I'm asking you for. Right? So there's absolutely nothing improper about it. So you've got the moral high ground for whatever that's worth. So that's why that's a good answer, because you want to, the strategy here is to get as far down the selection process as you possibly can to the point where they want to offer you the job. And then when they offer you the job, at that point, if you turn around and say, well, I need more money, there's a lot of pressure on them to satisfy you. Okay, because if you're the lead candidate and they want you and the hiring manager likes you and you're the person they want to hire and they've done the due diligence on you, they've done the background checks, they've done the reference checks, they've done all that work on you, and they write you an offer and they send it to you and do all this work, and then you just throw it back in their face and say, well, no, like I said, I need more money. That's very embarrassing for the recruiter. It's very annoying for the hiring manager, and it's a lot of work they have to redo. So they don't want to be in that situation. So there's a lot of pressure for them to just say, okay, fine. We'll scratch out that number, pencil in this number, and there you go. You're hired. Right? So that's the strategy to use, and that's why in an interview you want to give that answer. Try to avoid it at all costs. And then if you absolutely can't get out of answering it, they're really putting the screws to you, give a wide range. And if they push you anymore, you say, well, I'm sorry, I just can't give a more precise number at this point when all I have to go on is the job description. It doesn't mention remote work. It doesn't mention vacation time. It doesn't mention benefits. It doesn't mention sick time. It doesn't mention working conditions. It doesn't mention overtime. It doesn't mention 1,000 other things that are a big deal, right? So all I can say at this point is anywhere in this range would probably be okay. There's your answer, right? So that's how you answer that in an interview, right? But returning back to the problem of how do you answer it on a form if you don't even get to the interview yet and they're still prompting you for an answer. The bottom line is the way you answer it then is where you can't avoid giving a single number. You can't even put a range. You can only put a single number. And once again, you're faced with this dilemma. If I put what I actually want, I fear that I may be eliminated because maybe there's someone that's cheaper. But if I put a number too low so that I avoid getting eliminated for asking for too much, then I'm afraid that they'll offer me that low number and this job will hardly be worth taking, right? So what do I do? So here's what you do. Usually when you're just applying for the job, the only thing you know about it is what they've written in the job posting, which is usually not very much. It's usually a bunch of corporate gobbledygook that, doesn't really tell you any of the critical details about the job itself. Okay? For example, you don't know if once you're in there, within a month, they change your duties. Anyone ever had that happen to them? Right? You sign on for one job, they hire you, and then next thing you know, you're doing something else. Right? That's one of like 100 different scenarios that could happen. You don't know. Right? So they're not really giving you the information you need to make an informed decision. They're asking you to pick a number out of the air so that they can hold you to it, right? And what's going on is on these forms, they have formulas that look at the number you typed in, and they do a sort of pass-fail elimination. If the number is above a certain hurdle, they eliminate you because this candidate is wanting too much money. And sometimes if you put a number that's too low, if it's under a certain hurdle rate or hurdle number, they eliminate you also on the grounds that you're not serious, right? Some people say, oh, I just put 0 as the number, right? Or $1 or, one currency unit. Yeah, that doesn't work either a lot of times because they can eliminate you based on, oh, you're obviously not answering seriously, right? We don't ask this question so you can give a kiss-off answer. We ask this question because we're going to hold you to what you say, right? Or at least they're going to try to, right? So here's what you do, okay? Since they're not telling you a lot of critical things about the role, and there's all these blank spaces, as it were, in your understanding of what this role is going to involve, imagine it's a best-case scenario. Give them the benefit of the doubt. Imagine that there'll be a ton of remote work. They have fantastic benefits. There's plenty of opportunities for advancement. The work itself is really fun. The coworkers you're going to be with are going to be your best friends. Your boss is going to be awesome. There's all kinds of opportunities to network and make connections in that industry. And so on and so forth, right? So just imagine that they're all best case scenario. Then fill in the number. What's the lowest number you'd ever possibly accept to take that job? Okay, you're not being dishonest. You're saying, hey, you haven't told me any of these details, so I'm just assuming they're best case scenario, and this is how much money I would need to do that. So what you'll get is you'll get a relatively low number. That's what you put in. Now, if you're worried that they're going to hold you to that number, here's the deal. As you learn more about those blank spaces, those things that weren't disclosed, say you find out that there's actually no remote work and that there are no opportunities for advancement here. And maybe you meet the boss, the hiring manager at a job interview, and they turn out to be a real jerk that you really don't click with. It's going to be a real toil of a pleasure working for them, right? Well, you can always revise your salary requirement upwards as you discover these details later on, right? So if they turn around and you actually get to the end of the process and they say, here's an offer, you can turn around and say, well, yeah, I'm going to need you to add this much to that number. and then you got a deal, right? Absolutely no reason why you can't do that. I mean, it's honesty, right? You're being honest. You didn't sign on for these terrible conditions. They didn't disclose any of those conditions when they prompted you for a number, right? So that's how I'd recommend you handle these two scenarios when you answer this question on a form and when you answer it in an interview. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, let's go over to you guys. I see Shadow is here. Shadow says, hi, how to set new higher limit for your existing job position? Okay, I mean, is it better to seek unreal higher number than if you get even lower? Is it okay? Or to be realistic and say lower limit? I don't fully understand your grammar there, Shadow. Are you talking about in a job interview when they prompt you to answer this question, how much salary do you need? You're saying, I don't know what you mean by set new higher limit. The only relevant question is how low amount of money can they offer you and you'd accept, right? That's kind of what they're asking for. I don't think they're worried about offering you more money than you're expecting, right? So how you handle that is kind of what I said, right? The question that's relevant for you is to know at what point does it no longer make sense to take the job, okay? And that's something you have to have thought about before you go down to an interview or before you fill in that number on the sheet, on an online form. Okay, you can't just think of it in that moment. You have to have calculated and said, like, okay, this job would still make sense for me if I made this much, but no lower, right? So that's called your reservation price. So the idea is that if they say we're going to pay you something below your reservation price, you say, sorry, no can do, right? And you're confident in that because you've worked it out, right? You'd like to get this much. You'd like to get, say, 10, but you know that 6 is your reservation price. So if they offer you 6 and you can't get them to go any higher, you'd still take it. But if they offer you 5, it's very simple. You say, I'm sorry, I can't take it for 5. Just that I just can't. So if you want this to continue, I'm going to need 6, right? And the key is not revealing your reservation price to them at the beginning, right? You want them to think that you wouldn't take it for less than 9 so that they offer you 9, right? If they find out that that you would take it for 6, they'll offer you 6, right? So you have to come in there with that number that you don't reveal to them. Does that make sense? That's how this stuff works. Okay, so it involves you having thought about this before you get to a negotiation with these people, and that it involves you not revealing how low you'd be prepared to go, right? That's why it's best to avoid giving an answer at all, if at all possible. And as a worst case scenario, you give a range, right? You'd say, I would take it at anywhere between 6 and 10, somewhere in there. I can tell you, somewhere in there would be fine. Right? Does that answer your question? Okay, Shadow says, I mean on existing job, not a job interview. Okay, well, so you're renegotiating your pay while you're working? I have current salary level, and now they are asking, what do I expect in the future? Is it better to be optimistic or pessimistic? Okay, well, in order to answer that, I would need to know, why are they asking? What's going on? What's up? Do you know? Because if they're looking to eliminate some people, then that's going to affect how you answer this. If, on the other hand, they're wondering if you're the type of person they would promote into upper management, that's going to trigger a different answer, right? So you need to know what their goal is in order to know what to do about it, right? So if you know that, let me know in the chat, and then I would know how to proceed. Usually people don't just approach employees and say, I know you're making this much right now, but what do you expect to make this time next year? Usually that's not a common thing unless they're looking to either promote you or eliminate you or downgrade you, I suppose. But that's the same as elimination a lot of times. So let me know. In the meantime, I see there are 21 people here. Get in the chat. Let me know what you're wondering about. This is a Q&A. I don't really have an agenda of what to talk about beyond what I've already said today. So I'm here to help out people that might have questions. That's what I do on these live streams. But yeah, like I've hired people, I've fired people, I've managed people. You usually don't go to people and just ask them, what do you think of the compensation? When they're your employees, right? The reason for that is because obviously it's fine. If it wasn't fine, they'd be gone, right? And the other thing is that you don't want to, as an employer, you don't want to pay them more than you have to for them to do the same amount of work, like the same job. In the same way that when you go to the store and you buy something from the store, you don't want to pay more than you have to get it, right? That's your incentive when you're buying something. The employer's incentive is you don't want to have to pay any more for your resources than you need to, right? Just like if you were using electricity or energy or buying property or anything, you want to know how much it costs, and if you can afford it, great. But you don't want to pay more for it than you have to, right? So that's why you generally don't see this unless they're planning to do something. Shadow says they want to prepare a budget, so they are collecting data from employees. That's stupid. That doesn't make any sense. You mean they don't know how much they're already paying you? Of course they have that information. And then to decide what to do next, how much they need to keep us happy. They don't care about keeping you happy, just so you know. If they say that, they're lying. They want to keep you employed, right? They want to keep you in the job and not wanting to leave, okay? I know maybe I'm reacting a bit strongly to the term happy. I know what you mean, but that is stupid. Like this, they're asking you how much money you make so that they have that information. It's like, that's dumb. All they have to do is go talk to the HR department, say, I need the salary information or the compensation information on this department, right? And it's all in an Excel sheet, and they'll forward that, right? They don't need to do this, like a public opinion poll, or a questionnaire to know what you make, right? Right? So something weird's going on. That explanation doesn't make any sense. It might be, what I'd suspect is they're trying to see who's disgruntled, who's prepared to leave, who's preparing possibly to leave, right? Because if they want to minimize disruption when an employee leaves, the thing to do is to get ahead of it and to figure out, okay, this employee is secretly looking to leave. Okay, what employers want to do is they want to be in charge of that process. They want to terminate. They would rather terminate an employee before they leave than have the employee just suddenly quit on them, because that's disruptive for the employer. They're caught off guard, and they don't have a replacement ready in the wings at that moment, right? So it's disruptive. What they'd rather do is control the process. If they know this employee is fixing to leave, they'd rather terminate them on their own schedule and then start training a replacement, right? So that you minimize the disruption, right? That's what employers want to do. So maybe the motivation for them to do this is to see if they can find any employees that are possibly disgruntled because they answer by saying, oh yeah, this pay is not acceptable, and I'm really, I feel I'm worth much more, and I'm going to be acting on that in the near future. Something like that. I mean, it's still a stupid thing to do. You're not going to get reliable information. Everybody will say that, or a lot of people will say that, but something like 10% of the people who actually say that act on it. That's what data has shown when they look at this. Yeah, exactly. So they're looking to fire people. Like that's what you're just saying. As you say, as the budget is tight, so they want to see who is unhappy with the salary and what are expectations of those employees, something like that. Well, it's very simple, Shadow. Here's what you say. You say, I'm happy. The pay is great. The pay is fine, right? That's what you say. Whether that's true or not, well, in as much as this survey is concerned, your job is safe. Okay? Because if you rock the boat and you say, oh no, the pay here is unsatisfactory for what we're expected to do, I'm not motivated, I don't feel that I'm compensated fairly, I'm upset over it, I'm likely looking for other opportunities to jump ship, that's the kiss of death, right? You know, they're going to conclude that, okay, you're not with us, you're against us, you're not an employee we can rely on, you're looking to leave, right? That's what the takeaway is going to be. So why would you want them to think that about you? Even if it was true and you are looking for other opportunities, why would you want them to know this? The thing that's best for you is to look for other opportunities, all while you're securely employed in this situation. So at least you have money coming in and you have a stable, source of income. And then when you're ready to make your move, then you give your notice and then you move to another company because you have an offer in hand, right? That's how you want to do it. So don't give them any reason to target you as this person is not a good employee. They're looking to leave. They're not happy, right? You may think oh, maybe they're actually doing what they say. They're going to give me more money if I'm not happy, right? Hey, everything happens some of the time, but if I was to make a bet, I would not bet on that. That is less likely to occur. What's much more likely is that it's going to work out bad for you if you say you're unhappy and the money's not good. Okay, so that's kind of my take on that. Hopefully that makes sense. I mean, we have to go on the odds here. You can't know what absolutely will happen in what situation. You're just playing the odds. And the odds of an employer doing this so they can pay people more when people haven't already come to them and asked for more, it's highly unlikely. I've never heard of that. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. We really don't have a lot of questions today. Usually I get a lot. It's hard for me to keep up usually when in these live streams, but there's not a lot coming in. So if you're watching this and you have a question or you're wondering about something, get in the chat. Let me know. And what's the big issue for you these days? If you're engaged in a job search or you're looking to climb the ladder or anything like that, what specific issue are you wondering about? And I will do my best to give you a hand. You're welcome, Shadow. Hopefully that was helpful. Yeah, listen, this is business, right? And the best way to imagine it is you're running a household, right? Like when you come home, you have bills to pay and you've got to buy food and you've got to pay for rent or, whatever. And, you have expenses, right? And so just like you are trying to minimize your expenses, you don't want to, if you can, let's say you're paying, I don't know, $1,000 rent or something. If the landlord says, well, I'd rather you pay me $1,300, I think that's more fair, for what you were giving you. And then you would ask, your next question would be, well, do I have to pay $1,300? Is this like a requirement now? And they say, no, it's more of a guideline. The requirement is you pay $1,000, but I'd like you to pay $1,300. What's your response going to be? Your response is going to be, well, no, sorry, no dice. I'm going to pay $1,000 if that's the requirement. I'm not going to pay you more than I have to, right? So employers take exactly the same attitude with their employees, right? They will have an idea in mind of what each job is worth to them. So an employee in that job, they've come to the conclusion through a variety of different means that someone in that job should be paid this much, $1,000 a month, whatever. And if the employee comes back and says, well, I'd really like you to pay me $1,300, their blanket response is going to be, nope. If we're paying you $1,000 and you're staying and there are no performance issues, or even if there are performance issues, sorry, $1,000 is a reasonable amount for this job. Now, if you can't do this job for $1,000, we'll get someone who can, because we believe that this job is worth $1,000, right? So whether you work out or not, we're going to be paying $1,000, right? Unless some overwhelming evidence comes our way, that's our opinion on it, right? So that's how employers regard these. That's the attitude they have. That's how they're thinking when it comes to this stuff. Okay. Now, there may be some leeway in there if you have a one-to-one relationship with your boss, you're like an absolutely critical employee, you bring some unique things to the job, or it would be extremely disruptive if they were to get rid of you or you were to leave. Something like that. There's sometimes you can have mitigating factors, so that does happen. But generally speaking, what I said, that's the attitude employers have toward the value of employees, right? And it's exactly the same attitude that you would have to your monthly expenses running your household. That's why they feel this way about their monthly expenses, running their labor force, right? Sir Nathan says, where should I apply for non-ghost jobs? Okay, excellent question. Okay, just bear with me a second, okay? When I say what I'm about to say, I know it's a tough sell, especially for a lot of young people, and especially for people that are not tuned into this stuff, okay? But don't take my word for any of this. Go do your own research if you find it strange or surprising, okay? The jobs that are posted, okay? So like if you go out and you look for posted jobs that are posted publicly, the majority of those will be on the internet, but it could be posted publicly, but not on the internet, I suppose. Still, all of those jobs that you see, that's something like 20% of all the jobs that are actually out there. Okay. 80% of the jobs that are out there are not posted publicly. So the job exists, someone is hiring, but they don't put up like a post on a website and then pay to publicize it or expend a lot of time and energy publicizing it. And the reason for that is because they don't need to do it. As soon as they tell a handful of people that they know that, oh, we're hiring for this position, they immediately get volunteers and recommendations of people that they know who would be a candidate for this, right? So the demand outstrips the supply. So for that reason, they don't feel the need to like spend a lot of money and effort publicizing it far and wide, because even if you just start telling a few people that you're already getting some reasonably good candidates for it, right? And once you have about 10 reasonably good candidates, usually you don't need to look further afield, right? You could just sort of start with those 10, and chances are one of those 10 will be appropriate, right? So that's where a lot of the jobs are. Now, the term they have for that is called the hidden job market. It doesn't mean the jobs are hidden. It just means that nobody's bothered to publicize them because they don't need to, right? When you say hidden job market, it has this connotation of, oh, it's like a big conspiracy and it's a big secret. It's not. It really isn't, right? Like, for example, like let's say you needed to hire a friend to help you move your stuff from one apartment to another, right? Like I've used that example many times. Are you going to like put that on Indeed? Write it all up and put it on Indeed? No, you're not, because all you have to do is talk to a couple of your friends, say, hey, do you know anyone who could help me out for a couple of days? And they'll say, oh yeah, I called my buddy and they said they're free. It's like, okay, well, I'll pay you like whatever, this much an hour, and they can come over, right? Is that a big conspiracy? You didn't post it publicly? No, it isn't, right? So that's where a lot of the good jobs are, because the really good jobs are in very high demand. As soon as people hear about them, they put in for them, right? So you don't have to post it publicly and get 2,000 applicants to fill that position, right? Usually that leaves the dregs of the barrel, the jobs that are not great, the ones that pay very little for what you're expected to do, maybe crappy working conditions. Those are the ones that are tougher to fill, to find an actual good person to fill that role. That's where you got to look a bit harder. So those are the ones they tend to, generally speaking, publicize more, right? So, I mean, every job I've gotten in the last 15, 20 years or something, like every job, every bit of contract work, everything has all been in the hidden job market for me personally. So I'm a big advocate. I try and turn younger people on to the fact that this exists and the ways of tapping it to get a good job. But I find that, especially on YouTube, when I talk about it, it's a very tough sell. People are just not into hearing it. They just assume that this is all some kind of weird conspiracy, or it's a lie, or it's some elitist thing that only billionaires can do, or something. It's none of those things. So that's where they are. Now, if you want to just confine the discussion to where online you can find non-ghost jobs, it's simply a matter of going through the job postings that you see. One general rule is to look at company websites as opposed to job aggregators like Indeed or LinkedIn, okay? Because Indeed, they post jobs by other people. Like what they do is they sort of crawl the web and they find jobs here and there, and then they bring those listings and display them all together side by side on Indeed's website, right? So they sort of crawl the web and grab them and put them all in one place, right? So when you apply through Indeed, you're applying to a third party, right? Indeed would then forward that application to the actual company who's hiring, right? So one tip is to not necessarily go through just aggregators like Indeed or like LinkedIn. There were others too. There was Monster, there was ZipRecruit, all these ones. Go to the actual websites of the companies that are actually hiring, okay? And you will have slightly less ghost jobs, okay? Then, when you look at the listing, you have to sort of analyze what they're saying, because you can see some common red flags that indicate it's a ghost job, right? If the job is very, very vague, that's a standard red flag for a ghost job. If it's a very sort of open-ended kind of thing, that's also a red flag for a ghost job. So there's certain things like that you can do, but a lot of times, unfortunately, there's no way to know. So the only thing you can really do is just keep applying and don't wait by the phone. Just keep moving forward. If people get back to you, great. If they don't, it doesn't matter, because you're moving ahead, applying for things full speed. Hopefully that makes sense. I mean, I could get into that longer, but there's more questions now. Jim or JM McClinton says, "Hi, Bill. I'm having a hard time landing a job. I'm not sure if my resume is working for me or I need more skills." Chances are you don't need more skills to get a job. I mean, I'm playing the odds, and the vast majority of people are hireable, right? Like right now, they're ready to go. They can do something, even if it's stacking boxes. Like they have skills. It's not a question you need more skills to get hired. You already have skills. You just need to get hired so you can use the skills you have. Okay, now make sure that you're customizing your resume, because if you're just using a sort of one-size-fits-all resume and just blasting that out to all these jobs, chances are you will get nowhere. Okay, this is the unfortunate state of hiring in 2024. There's a glut of candidates because everybody's applying for hundreds of jobs all the time, right? Like, you could apply for 100 jobs a day. So everybody's saturating all the public postings with applications, right? So if you're going in with like 1,000 other people, it's hard to elevate yourself above the crowd. So the only way you could do that is if you're customizing your resume, you're basically feeding their lingo back at them when it comes to the requirements. They're looking for this, 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 and this. They look at your resume and it says quite prominently that you have this, 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 and this, like right front and center, and not a lot of other things watering it down. So make sure you're doing that. That's probably the most important thing if you're playing the game of applying for publicly posted jobs, which I don't recommend as the sole thing you do. But if that's what you're doing, if that's where you're looking, make sure you're doing that. Sinister says, hi, suppose I had an offer at hand from another company, but I'm currently employed. What's the guarantee I get hired by that company that's offering me a higher pay? There is no guarantee. It's a risk you take. Okay, so you've got an offer in hand. You're employed at company A, and you're happily employed. You're making enough money, but you've got an offer in your hand from company B. And company B says, hey, I'll pay you 20% more if you come and work for me. And you would start on this date. And you've accepted. You've said, okay, sure, we got a deal. You sign it, you return it to them, and they approve it. What's the odds, or what's to prevent them from turning around and saying, on your start date, after you've quit company A and you've shown up to company B to start, you show up at the company and they say, I'm sorry, I don't know how to tell you this, but we've run out of money, and so we've had no choice but to rescind all new job offers, including yours. So I'm sorry, you don't have a job here, right? What's the guarantee that they're not going to do that? There is no guarantee. So what you can do is you can do some research on the company. You can do due diligence. You can find out their history of have they done that to a lot of other people. You could look at that online. And you could look at their current financial situation. Are they growing? Are they laying off? Are they, you know what I'm saying? Like, you can get some insight into that. And then you can make an educated, informed decision on whether getting 20% more salary or whatever is worth the tiny risk that this could happen to you, right? If it's a good company. If it's a bad company, it might be a more significant risk. But that at least you can make a more informed decision. There's no guarantees that they won't do that. I mean, you wouldn't expect it under normal circumstances, but it is possible. So just do your due diligence, and then that'll inform you maybe, and your own, I don't know what your situation is. Like, can you afford to take a little bit of risk? I don't know. But that's all you can really do. Hopefully that makes sense. Shadow, one more question. HR says we do not have any budget for salary improvement this year, and I have a new assistant who is great, but has low salary, and he is asking for a salary improvement. What to do then? I don't know what to do then. Listen, first of all, HR will always say that that the budget is tight, they don't have any more money. Because if they say that, oh yeah, we have a lot of money to throw around, first of all, if that were true, it means the company is being mismanaged. Okay? Like, for example, would you ever go to your landlord? Let's say you pay rent, $1,000 rent a month or something. I don't know. And the landlord says, I'd really prefer that you pay me $1,300. I think that's kind of, from what I'm giving you guys, you're getting a really good deal. So I think $1,300 would be a more reasonable rent. But the requirement is $1,000. Would you go and say, hey, I've got some extra money this year. I have more money to spend on rent if I needed to. So you know what? I'm going to pay you $1,300 because you're absolutely right. What you're giving me is pretty good for the money. So I think it's only fair that I pay you $1,300. Does that happen? No, it doesn't. Right? Because of our incentives, right? So equally, HR is never going to say, oh yeah, we have lots of money to throw around, so we're thinking bonuses for everyone this year, right? They're not going to say that. If you're in a smaller company and you have an owner who wants to be generous and they say, hey, the New Year's coming or Christmas is coming or whatever, I think you guys did a great job this year, so generous bonuses for everyone. They can do that. You sometimes get that if the company's doing well. but HR department is not going to volunteer this stuff. HR is tasked with getting as good a workforce as they can for as little money as they can. That's what their job is. And you rate them on their performance in accomplishing that goal. So it's against their own interest to say, oh yeah, I got money to optionally give out to people. If they're working here and they're doing their job, why would I need to pay them more? Anyway, there's a lot to this, but that's the bottom line. So for that reason, Shadow, if an HR department said that to me, I'd immediately be thinking BS. That's obviously BS, right? The real reason they're doing this is for another reason, not for that stated reason. Pearl, is it advisable to take an experienced level job one doesn't have a lot of experience in, even if one scales through the interview? Sales through the interview process? If they'll give it to you, listen. I don't know what type of person you are. Okay. Now, speaking for myself, I have been in a lot of situations in my life where I was thrown into something where my first impression was like, oh crap, I'm in over my head. How the hell am I going to be able to do all this? I don't know anything about this. I'm going to have to figure this out. And then fast forward 6 months and I'm crushing it. That's my perspective. And people are reinforcing that by not firing me and telling me I'm doing a good job and, giving me performance bonuses and all this kind of stuff. So it's like, okay. And I feel pretty confident. I feel like, hey, I now kind of feel comfortable in how all this stuff works. And I feel like I'm doing a half decent job. So after about 10 times being in that situation and overcoming the challenge, I gained a lot of confidence in myself and said, I've been in situations before that seemed really hard and they seemed almost impossible, but I managed to figure it out, given a little bit of time, and systematically figure everything out and work at it and improve, and then I'm doing it. And there's no imposter syndrome because I actually feel like I know what I'm doing. So if you have had similar experiences and you believe in yourself, you feel you can overcome challenges that how overwhelming it feels when you're first introduced to it, but then you remember how confident you feel because you feel like you figured it out, then I would take it. I wouldn't shy away from it. It's like I've had to learn hard things before and, very tight time frames, and I rose to the challenge. So I would take it if it's a real opportunity for you. But if you're a different type of person and your big priority is not taxing yourself too hard and, just being comfortable and enjoying what you do all the time and not having it be stressful, and maybe you're not super ambitious or something, then maybe you wouldn't take it, right? It depends on who you are. I would take it personally, but it's not like everyone thinks like me. So, yeah. And when I was starting out, when I was a lot younger in my 20s, 30s, I probably would have shied away from it because I'd feel like, oh no, how could I possibly do that? And that would inform my decision. So I don't know if that helps any, but that's kind of my reaction to it. Jay McClinton says, a Planet Fitness ad interrupted the live stream. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, YouTube puts ads where it feels like it. I don't really have much control over that. Pearl, please, how does one get promoted quickly in a corporate setting, or what are the things that one needs to be done for quick ascension? Excellent question. Excellent. I like talking about this stuff. Okay, here's the deal. People are different. It's not like all companies are run the same way, with the same goals, with the same priorities. Sure, there's a lot of commonality, but people are quite variable. So the first thing you can do is make sure you actually understand the priorities. Don't just assume you know what the priorities are, right? Like, for example, you work in a job, okay? Here's a standard dilemma, okay? Should you take initiative? Should you initiate things on your own authority that could potentially have a big upside, but if they backfire, could have a pretty damaging downside for you too? Should you take those opportunities, or should you play it safe and predictable and don't overstep your authority and get approval for everything you do before you do it, right? Which one would be rewarded, right? Well, there's no answer to that, because in one environment, the former thing would be rewarded. In another environment, the latter thing would be rewarded, right? Now, generally speaking, in a large corporate environment, in a large enterprise environment, they would prefer to reward the latter. They don't want people thinking independently. They don't want people taking initiative. They want people to ask for permission. They want people to get approvals before they do anything. That's just a very common culture in larger organizations. In smaller organizations, generally speaking, you would favor the former. They want people to not have to ask permission for every little teeny tiny thing they got to do as part of their job. They want to just go and get it done. The boss doesn't have time to micromanage every little thing you do. They just want you to take care of it. And if you understand, the priorities of the company, and you understand, like how to act appropriately and all this kind of stuff, they just want you to go out and get stuff done and do a good job without them having to stand over you all the time, right? And then on top of that, you have the variability of individuals. Like, what does your individual boss care about, right? So there's that, right? But there's also a problem where if you ask them and say, what do you really want me to do, right? You would expect that they would just tell you outright, explicitly, here's what I care about. In order, I care about this, then this, then this, then this, right? The problem is that people won't even be honest with you sometimes as to what they really care about, right? For example, maybe there's some political type stuff, right? For example, you would say, like something that I had to deal with early in my career was safety, right? I was the head of safety for a company. And, officially, safety is a number one priority, right? If you don't have any incidents, that's number one priority, right? But what you find is that, does the company make money through safety? No, the company makes money through sales or by doing jobs or whatever it does. And so there's a conflict there, because safety tends to slow things down. If you really get more and more safe, you slow further down, it's more and more expensive. So there's a real contradiction there. So officially someone would say, oh yeah, safety is priority. Absolutely, everything has to be met with with safety requirement. But in practice, you kind of get a feel for okay, how far they're prepared to go with safety. If we meet the minimum standard, is that okay? Or are we expected to go further? Or, so people won't be honest with you because they don't ever want to go on record as having said, oh, safety is not the absolute number one priority in every way, right? So there's a lot of things like that. Safety isn't the only one. There's a lot. There's at least 10 of those easily. So even when you ask a straight question, you won't get a straight answer. So you have to get a feel for not by what people say, but what their actions are as to what they really care about, right? So your question was, at the end of all this, your question was, what are the things that one needs to be done for quick ascension? Is you need to figure out what the person in charge actually cares about, and you need to deliver that, whatever that is, okay, for ascension. And you also need to figure out what their attitude is towards getting promoted, because they might think you're amazing, but in your current job, Whereas they think that the person above you would not be nearly as good as you in your job, but would be better than you in their job that they currently occupy, right? So you've got to like just because you're amazing at one job doesn't mean that you would automatically be amazing in a job one level up. You see what I'm saying? You have to understand how they think about that stuff, what their principles are and their values and their preconceived notions, possibly based on history, right? So you do that by learning as much as you possibly can about the people upstairs that decide your fate and they guide your career within that organization. What's important to them? How do they conceive of these things? Maybe you need to tack on an entirely different skill set to be considered for promotion. You're already awesome at your job, but getting even better at your current job is not the thing that's going to get you up here. You'd have to tack on the skills necessary to be up here, which have nothing to do with the job down here, right? So keep your eyes open, have as many conversations with these people as possible, and observe what goes on, what actions get rewarded, what actions don't, and try and peel back the layers and see what's actually going on. And that's how you learn about this stuff. Okay? There are some general principles of how this stuff works, but what I found is that every situation is completely different. The variability of people trumps any kind of standard rule for these things when you get to that level. So, I don't know. Hopefully that helps. If there are any more questions, ask them in the chat now. I've sort of come to the end of the questions that people ask. If there are no more, I'll probably be winding this down. I see there are 22 people here. Thank you for joining me today. Hopefully you're getting something out of this. Yeah, business is a lot of conflicting priorities. That's what nobody wants to admit openly, right? Like, I mean, where do I begin? Like, for example, quality, like whatever your company does, whatever your business does, if you get better at it, like you sell a better product or you deliver a better quality service, that costs more money and that slows everything down, right? People don't want to spend money on improving things because it's painful. You could, instead of taking that money and literally putting it right in your pocket, you're going to take it, you're going to spend it on the company, right? That's a tough call for people to make at the top, right? I mean, if you had the choice of saying like, okay, we're going to offer you a $2,000 bonus, and you have the choice of either taking that money home in your pay, where you get to keep all of it, or we will buy you a $2,000 desk for your office or something at work. Would you spend that money on your work, like on your office at work? Or would you just put it in your pocket, take it home, and then buy a big screen TV or something with it? You know what I mean? It's a tough thing to get people to say, no, I will spend it on work because there might be a chance that it will help me to advance in the future. Tough for humans to choose that option, right? So there's a trade-off right there between quality and short-term profitability, right? And now if you ask people, you say, what's our priority? And then people will say the party line, the politically correct thing. They'll say, oh yeah, we care about quality. Quality is job one, right? I think it was Toyota that said that, quality is job. I mean, they're one of the few companies that can sort of boast about their quality, but you know what I mean? Like that's the politically correct thing to say, right? You won't get in trouble in terms of public relations if you say that, right? Regardless of how you actually behave. So if you're operating in that environment, you're wanting to know what to do to get you ahead. It's not just as simple as believing them when they say, we care about quality first. So you focus on quality and then discover that you don't get rewarded because really that wasn't the actual top priority for them. Even though that's what they said. Okay, not a lot of questions coming in. I think I've lost everybody. Okay, well, thank you very much for being here. You guys are awesome. If you are wondering how to get hired, and you're experiencing some difficulties in your job search campaign, all my advice is all together in one place in this course right here. I highly recommend that you check it out. That can really help you break through the impasse that you might be at in your job search campaign. It talks about, the standard stuff about how to do job interviews and write your resume and all that, but it also goes into a lot of the networking type stuff that introverts can do. It's the method that I use to get a lot of contract work, and I've actually got a couple of jobs through this further in the past, and I built a consulting business doing exactly this stuff. So that can help open up the hidden job market for you and show you where a lot of the really good opportunities are. So check that out. There's a link in the description, and I also made a video that answers questions about the course, so it's fully transparent as to what you're getting into and what it involves. So check that out. Thank you for being here. I will be back very shortly, actually, within an hour, with my next live stream called Honest HR Nitrous, where we really talk about the realities of HR, the recruitment selection process, and job search in this day and age right now. And so if you've got some strong feelings on that, and you're annoyed with some of these seeming contradictions and inconsistencies, join me for that. That's where we explore a lot of those. Thanks very much. You guys are awesome. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you soon.